we are going to go ahead and solve by completing the square. So again, if you look at this quadratic and you try to factor it, your C value is positive, your middle value, B value is negative. So that means if I were to try to just jump in and factor this, I need two negative numbers that when I multiply them, I get 3, and I add them and get -2. No such numbers exist. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to use completing the square to go ahead and solve this. First step, move the constant over to the other side. So I have x squared minus 2x equals a -3. I now need to figure out what number I'm going to add to both sides to complete the square. So to do that, I grab my B value. My B value is a -2. I have -2 divided by 2 squared. That gets me a -1 squared equals 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And now I can go ahead, this is a perfect square trinomial, and I can factor that. Nice and easy. I'm going to do my one set of parentheses, it's going to be squared. My middle term is negative, drop in my x, and I need half of b. Well, we already figured that out. Half of b is -1. Notice the negative is already there. So that is factored. -3 plus 1 is a -2. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and solve for x now. Let me just scoot this down. I have x minus 1 squared equals -2. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget your plus minus. This leaves me with x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of -2. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And again, don't forget, when you have that plus minus and a square root, when you move a constant over, it needs to go to the left of the plus minus. So I have x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of -2. Now let's simplify the square root of -2. X equals 1 plus or minus. I can't take the square root of 2. That's simplified as much as possible. But again, remember, this square root of -2 is also the square root of 2 times the square root of -1. Square root of -1 is I, the imaginary number. So I'm going to go ahead and write this as I times the square root of 2. So I have two solutions here. X equals 1 plus I times the square root of 2, and x equals 1 minus I times the square root of 2. And now we've been talking about when we solve for x, we're solving these quadratics, we're looking for the x-intercepts. If you see imaginary numbers in your solutions, this means the graph does not cross the x-axis. So, x-axis. So, for instance, something like this, if you have a coordinate plane, you could have a graph. This one opens up. It could be sitting up here. It could be over there. It could be up really high. It could be flipped down. It could be like this. but the graph does not touch the x-axis, which is why we're going to get these imaginary solutions.